that's a good one. The main threat for the, peaceful towns and cities was, of course, the Russian, Russian jets and Russian ballistic missiles and Russian long-range missiles, and we were particularly threatened by the fact that they started purchasing the new equipment from Iran, and of course we faced the first, I would say, manifestation of Iranian-Russian Axis, alliance last October when Kiev was severely hit by Shahed drones, and it was, Russians wanted it to be a game changer to cast this psychological warfare against us, against the Ukrainian cities, but of course they wouldn't gain a ground, in the heads of the Ukrainians, but they wanted to create havoc and disastrous panic within the cities, including the capital city, of course, because they dream of Kiev like you dream of your, beloved one. They wanted it, by all means, they wanted to pay any price to get it, but they wouldn't get it when they started attacking the capital a year ago. But then they tried to create havoc and panic, but later on, since we got the modern technology, we got Patriot missiles, and we got all the air defense possible. At this stage, almost all the air defense possible, including IRIS-Ts, which are doing a perfect job on the streets of Kiev and elsewhere right away. We could improve our ratio of downed and deactivated missiles and drones almost by more than 90%, so to say. So if we remember the interview by the head of staff, General Zaluzhny, that he gave to Economist on my birthday, that was December 3rd, it was published December the 16th, when Zaluzhny said that the ratio, when we downed the Russian missiles and all this gear they're throwing at us, all the crap they're throwing at us, by that stage it was 79. So out of 100 missiles and drones, we were able to down 79, which is pretty good. But still, of course, Russia could succeed, and we had a few casualties, quite a few casualties, back in October. But during these last weeks, when it was the heaviest barrage over the Kyiv sky a week ago, that was an absolute fire show in the sky. It looked like an Iron Dome in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. It looked like the absolute inferno, and yet we were able, Ukrainian air defense was able to down every single caliber and Kinzhal missile that was thrown at our capital city, which was a major breakthrough when Russians could no longer use this, scaring tactic. So we're winning the war, in the air, even not having, we don't have F-16s yet. We've already got the great news from our allies that our pilots have been trained and are now being trained by the allies. And of course, we're waiting for F-16s. That would be a major breakthrough. But even now, not to speak of the successes and the absolute splendor that our armed forces are showing in the East, we are now in a position to say that yes, we are able to down Shaheds and Kinzhal and even the Kinzhal missiles that Russians claimed to be absolutely not,
cannot be taken down.
Not apt not to be taken down by any anti-rocket, anti-air defense system.
So to say that
to be another fake,
yeah.
and we proved it to be a fake, and yeah, we're winning this war.
Cool. That's a good news. You are winning the war. I wanted also as your experience. So you were not during this time just a journalist, but for a few months you were also as a soldier serving for your country. Can you describe like shortly how was the experience to serve as a soldier for your country?
Yeah, I was a reconnaissance. Within the reconnaissance, within the infantry, light infantry. We were not so light. We always joked about it. So everyone was a male after 40. So I was the youngest in the group. I'm 43. There were people in the late 50s. There were a couple of younger soldiers, younger boys who joined us, but mainly everyone was in his 40s. And we were not that light and not that mobile, but we could still kick some ass, in Irpin. And I was in Georgia then. I was in exile for 6 years. I couldn't go back to Ukraine because of the investigative reporting and writing I did before. And so for 6 years I was away. I was away from my Ithaca. I was away from my loved ones. And my odyssey was only has only started at this stage, as I realized later. So I was in Georgia, and my fiance was in Kiev at that stage, and I learned that she's helping the territorial defense, and she's doing her job to stop the Russians. And of course, at that stage, I wouldn't stay away for a second. And so I gave a call to a close friend of mine, David Katsarava, who's Georgian, who's the leader of the anti-occupational movement, which is the only force in the Caucasus that is actually trying to oppose the creeping annexation of the territories of the southern Caucasus. And so I gave this friend of mine a call, and I said, look, what's your plan? He said, we're going to Ukraine. We know that you're not really welcome there at this stage, that you have some troubles there, but we're going there, and are you joining us? And it was this, in a split second, you had to make this decision, you had to take this decision and make this move, and of course I said yes. And so we traveled there as a small group, as a reconnaissance group, that later joined the forces with the Ukrainians, and we fought in Irpin. We took our part in liberation of Irpin. We did a few pretty effective, I would say, scout and sabotage operations against the Russians. We destroyed at least 2 vehicles, armored vehicles, and we killed about 7 to 8, maybe more, from 8 to 16 Russians in a close-range gunfight. Small gun combat that we had back in March. We lost 2 of our best friends, and David Ratiani was one of them, close friend of mine, and my brother from Georgia and from a place called Svaneti, a really close friend, a really good soldier, who was given decorated with a medal for valor back in 2008, when he was fighting in a war with the Russians that were occupying Georgia at this stage. And so we did it for more than 2 months, basically, and we took part in liberation of Irpin and the mopping up operation in Hostomel.
Like the people who are going to watch this interview probably want to know, how is the feeling to fight for your country? Like, can you describe the feeling of fighting for your country?
Well, there's no feeling, it's something that you gotta do. There's no excitement, there's no fear. I mean, there is fear in the battle. You gotta be scared when you hear the mortar fire, when 120 caliber mortar shells are
coming by you.
Trying to hit you. You gotta be scared. Of course you're scared. You're shit scared. David Ratiani, after his death, he saved my life by giving me a little rope to hold my glasses, because I'm half blind, to be honest with you. But my dioptries and my glasses are like 10 plus. So I could barely see anything. But in a short-range combat with a gun, I still can do something. At 50 meters, 30 meters, and in the wood, I was pretty effective. With my
Yeah.
limited eyesight, I still could do some shit. But when we got shelled and stuff, I almost lost my eyesight because of shelling. But the thing that he gave me, the little rope that he gave me, it saved my life. And later we evacuated the body from the battlefield, and it was just one of the fights that we had. Like you asked how it feels like. It feels like like you're at home. You finally go back to your home country, and this is a thing that you just have to do. And I was happy and smiling and laughing when I was watching the roofs of Kiev with the night vision goggle and the thermal glass, and I saw those cats jumping over the roofs when all the windows were blind or empty. There was no light in the houses, but those small
Creatures.
felon creatures were jumping over the roofs, and I saw them and I was laughing. And then my boys, my Georgian boys, my brothers asked me, "What the hell are you laughing at, dude?" And I said, "Geez, I'm at home."
Yeah.
So it was this mixture of gladness, happiness, and fear. But the fear goes away when you're away from the battle, and next day you go back and you kick the ass again, and you're lucky to survive. And you pray a lot.
Yeah.
You pray a lot to ancient gods, Jesus Christ, Athena Palace, your ancestors' spirits, your loved ones, and you just pray that you survive and you're going to see them next day. And you got the next day, and you can text someone you love, and you can text someone you care for, and you're happy. And then you write a tidbit of text, and then you go to the battle again, and again you pray, and again you survive. And this is how we won Kiev back. And
So-
I'm just the happiest man on earth to be there at those days.
So-
That was my happiest and luckiest experience ever.
Yeah, that beyond this experience, extraordinary experience of yours, like as a journalist, how was I want to know, like, was it difficult to oppose the Russian propaganda as a journalist from Ukrainian side?
I think that with the full-scale invasion, because when this war is called a war starting from February 24th of 2022, it's actually also a part of the Russian propaganda, and half of the world is still following it. So we gotta be clear that the war has started in February 2014, when Russia started the operation of the annexation of Crimea. And at that stage, it was barely called a war. It was called anything but the war, but it was war. The first blood was shed in the middle March of 2014, when the first Russian gun shot the first Ukrainian soldier. And this guy was a cartographer. He was the guy who was basically drawing maps. And interestingly enough, this guy who was killed, his name was Sergei Kukurin. He was from Crimea, and he was the first victim amongst the military who was shot dead by the Russians ethnically. And I hate this world because, this word takes us back to some crazy times when people were thinking of their ethnicity. But in this war, it matters because Russians are still using those Nazi-style propaganda, trying to separate people by their ethnicity and the language they speak. So it is important sometimes to fight propaganda with the facts that actually, show the roots and the ethnicity of some of the victims, because this is important to counterattack Russians. So where I'm leading to is that the first victim of this war amongst the military, ethnically, was considered a Russian in Crimea. This Ukrainian soldier, this brave man who was standing against the Russians without his weapon, even the side weapon. He didn't have a Kalashnikov or a gun in his hand. He was shot by the Russians. Ethnically was considered a Russian. In his documents issued in the Soviet Union, he was registered as the Russian ethnicity in Crimea. And yet he was the Ukrainian soldier, and he was the first victim. So the thing is that Russians were trying to bullshit the world with is that they are protecting Russian or Russian-speaking population in Ukraine. I am a Russian speaker. My mother tongue is Russian. I only learned Ukrainian when I was 13 after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and I was the soldier of this war, and I was with the infantry and with the reconnaissance. And the guy who was killed in the first day of this war in March 2014 was considered Russian by the Russians.
So going back to propaganda, so they were using a lot of social media and saying that we are going to occupy and so. Like I mean, how was it difficult to convince Ukrainians that this, what is the Kremlin broadcasting, is not true, because the internet shortages and electricity shortages and so on?
I think that after the full-scale, attack, full-scale invasion, all the T's have been crossed, and no one really thought any longer or had any sentiment, if they had any, that Russians are doing a political or any sort of a humanitarian quote unquote operation to protect their own stuff, because alongside with Ukrainians and the Crimean Tatars and Russian ethnically Russian population or Russian-speaking population, and everyone was killed. Everyone was attacked. Everyone was under the at the gunpoint. So I don't really think at this stage that the Russian attempts of propaganda could be of any use in this war. However, we don't have to be over-optimistic about it, and there are still people who kind of buy into this, idea of Russian rights to protect the Russian-speaking populations and the Russians. But for this, I told you this story about the first soldier who was killed. This is important. This is a purest and most dramatic example of how truth is beating the fake. And in this case, this is a human life that is behind this story.
My friend, I was reading a lot about one story saying that the Russian bombed with their missiles one bunker where there are lots of NATO high officers and so on. So was it this true?
No, that's complete fake.
Complete fake. So, and how many of this kind of news were fake and even broadcast by some, let's say, Americans on TikTok? So.
Well, that's the good one. I'm not really following the Russian propaganda or any Russian outlet at this stage. I'm just not doing this. What we do is we try to connect the dots in a little project that I call the Second Front, when we try to look at the other countries where Russian influence, the hybrid, the direct, military or economic is somehow active. And I'm not really into fact-checking Russian outlets, because this is just not part of the job at this stage. However, what Russians are doing, I'll give you one example, for instance. When we were heading to the front line, and I was there as a soldier, and we were on the way, Russian Telegram channels were spreading the news that a group of Georgian volunteer fighters were captured or killed in the vicinity of Mariupol. And they were throwing this into this, media channel, into various media channels, as trying to demoralize, to lower the morale of the rank and file of the Georgian volunteers who were heading to Ukraine at this stage. And so they were trying to make them believe that half of their brothers were already dead or tortured, so that it would scare them off. And again, this proved to be fake because what we did, and I was there not as a journalist but as a soldier again, so I was doing a mission for my commander, for Giga Robakidze, the head of our little unit, to verify and fact check the information about it. And later on we realized that it was all fake because the Georgian squad was never in this district at this stage. Yeah. They were never hit. This is just one of those examples when you have to basically stop listening and reading to this crap. Just because out of 100 messages, you could only get, a couple of potentially
true ones.
Truthworthy statements, but then they are overwhelmingly, these Telegram channels whatsoever, they're overwhelmingly filled with a bunch of fakes that would bring you into the belief the Russians are winning the war. Yeah. Our prisoners of war who came back to Ukraine after the exchanges, most of them, from what I hear, from what I understand, were getting the news from the Russians and Russians only. And for months, they believed that Ukraine has already lost the war, that their families are already in captivity, that Ukraine no longer exists. And being in captivity, being cut off all the means of communication, you can only rely on your intuition and rely on the faith and rely on some willpower that holds you together in a moment when you hear that everything's lost, and the cause is lost, and your home is already destroyed. And it took those people tremendous willpower to cut this propaganda, being in a position when they could no longer get any other information. Yeah. So I believe that the only thing that we could do is not to become prisoners of war by our own will, and just not to allow Russians ever to bring in the pieces of fake news that could downgrade our firm belief that yes, indeed, we are winning this war, and this is factual and not mythical.
Yeah. The last thing we want to ask you and not take you longer is Ukraine is winning the war. Allies now are helping, training, weapon, and everything. And that threat that Putin did it in the beginning, that he's going to push the button of the nukes, is not happening. Is there any chance that it's going to happen a nuke war or nothing?
Well, I don't really buy into their, Russian propaganda that they would ever use this thing. Firstly, their arsenals of the nukes are, I would say, far from the condition that they're boasting of. And this is what we already understand, and the Allies already understand. Secondly, it would not bring them anywhere close to victory in this war, and would only make things worse with the sanctions and all the other means of oppressing of the Putin's regime. Also, the air defense is now strong enough, basically, to help us to down their ballistic missiles as well. So again, this is another scary tactic that would try to make Europeans, in particular Northern Europeans, Germans and others, to buy into this old paradigm of Russian greatness and their power, which is again proved to be a fake one after the year of war, when the biggest, the largest, country on this continent that boasted of the military power for decades has proved to be impotent to taking over a way smaller country with way less capacity, but the only benefit and the only real power was the spirit of the people and the spirit of the volunteer fighters and the population that basically held together the country at the moment of the gravest threat in its history.